my name is Susanna. I'm a compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the grey sheet, and I write them down. I commit them to my sponsor. I eat what I say I'm going to eat, no matter what, and I don't eat between meals, no matter what. And abstinence is the most important thing to me today. My abstinence date is the 15th of February 2020, and today I'm 97 days abstinent. So firstly, I'm sorry for those of you who were at the Saturday morning London meeting. I got sort of pounced on as I entered the room and asked to qualify there. And I can never turn down an opportunity for service. So I'm sorry if this is all a repeat. But anyway, so a bit about myself. What can I say about myself except that, I grew up in a normal, dysfunctional, middle-class English family. My mother was very, very ill when I was born, and subsequent to that, she continued to, she left hospital, but she continued to be very ill with mental health and addiction issues herself. My parents got divorced when I was very young. Blah, 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 usual sort of story. But I think, in retrospect, I think I suffered quite a lot of childhood emotional neglect through no fault of my parents. They just were who they were. And that's the way things were. I was always into food when I was a kid. I was called the dustbin. I loved eating. I remember going to my grandmother's house and eating a sort of cereal-based breakfast thing that you bake in the oven, and I just have bowl after bowl. And I got sent away to boarding school when I was 6, and we had to finish what was on our plate at meal times, and I was always asking for seconds. But despite that, actually, because I was very active, I was pretty skinny, really right up until my late 20s, I would say. But I discovered alcohol when I was 15 or 16, and that kind of took over the show for 20 years or so. But in reality, food was always my primary addiction. And when I got sober 20 years ago, I was becoming overweight then. I hit about 220 pounds because in rehab they just fed us huge meals, and that on top of all the carbo loading I was doing after drinking binges. I did get pretty heavy. I then lost all that weight. I went to Weight Watchers and, surprisingly enough, had to weigh and measure, or not weigh, but certainly measure 3 meals a day and not eat anything in between. And I did really well, and I lost the weight and actually kept it off for quite some time. But it gradually started drifting back, and I would say that I kind of managed it by over-exercising, really. And I was in the army, and going on operations and wars and stuff like that was also a very good way of losing weight. And I used to do a lot of extreme altitude mountaineering, and really the main reason for that is so that I could indulge in guilt-free eating once we came off the mountain. And it interests me how I sort of casually risked my life, putting myself in dangerous situations, either in dangerous security situations, or dangerous hypoxia, low oxygen situations, just so that I could really indulge in a bit of guilt-free eating on my return. And I'd never really seen it like that. I think I kept things pretty on an even keel until I met my husband. And once I met my husband and we were courting and eating out a lot, and I thought, oh, all bets are off. And really after that, my food did get slightly out of control, although I was still able to diet successfully. And but even with sort of successful dieting, I managed to persuade a gastric surgeon to give me a gastric band in 2011. I mean, I barely met the minimum criteria in terms of my weight, but I remember having a conversation with him and saying, look, I can see the direction that my eating's taking me, you know, in terms of overeating, binge eating, and really stuffing my food until I couldn't breathe properly. I had to lie flat. I couldn't bend in the middle. I had to lie flat, and I was doing that a couple of times a week, maybe. So he's fitted a gastric band, you know, under general anaesthetic. So another risk that I was prepared to undertake in order to try and get my eating under control. But actually, and it worked a bit. It took away the kind of the really heavy binging till I was absolutely stuffed full. But needless to say, I worked my way around it. My car became my sanctuary, and I was doing I was driving 5 hours each way to work, you know, at the beginning and the end of the week, and it became, yeah, the car was my sanctuary for eating. And you know, I remember my husband getting in the car one day and he said, God, it smells like a sweet shop in here. And there's all these, you know, I was constantly hiding wrappers. And I got to the point where I don't know, there were a couple of things going on, and I mentioned this before. I had a problem with my hip, and I'd been doing some physiotherapy, stretching, and I moved into yoga. I'd also started, once I retired from the army, which I did a couple of years ago, I started some work around creative recovery, because I felt very blocked once I came out of the military and I was doing different work. And there was a lot of work I was doing on my kind of inner artist child. And the program that I was following, I had to do these artists' dates where I kind of take my artist child out to just have a bit of a play. And I just couldn't do it because I was always having this argument, oh, well, what was an artist date? That meant that I could just sit on the sofa and eat what I wanted all day, because that to me was the idea of a kind of all bets are off day, was just sitting on the sofa eating. And I thought, no, that just cannot be. I don't want to have that sort of relationship with, you know, doing artist dates and treating my artist child to just anything they want to eat. And I just knew that wasn't right. And the yoga as well, you know, I wanted to study yoga therapy, and I just knew I couldn't do it with my head being in the state it was. I just felt constantly full of self-pity. And just, you know, at the stage, at the time before I came into GreySheet, I was trying to do fasting. So I tried that 5-2 diet, and that worked really, really well. So I changed it to the 4-3 diet, which then became the 3-4 diet, which then became just not eating at all during the day. And of course, that then resulted in just kind of controlled binging in the evenings. And then actually I was just snacking and grazing during it, and it all just went to rat shit, as these diets do. And I would just waste so much time just drifting around the house, you know, grazing and snacking, and then feeling sorry for myself that I was grazing and snacking, and hating myself for doing that, but not really being able to find any way out of it. And eventually I thought, I can't do my yoga therapy studies, and I can't do my artist date with my head in this state. And I got in touch with GreySheet. I had attended a few OA meetings for about 5 months, years, around the time that I had my gastric band fitted. And I remember, and I said this last week, but I remember a girl coming in absolutely furious with her GreySheet sponsor, who had pulled her up on her abstinence, you know, called out her abstinence because she had eaten some item of uncommitted food between meals. And she was saying how ridiculous it all was, GreySheet, and she had left and she was going to do OA and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember her slagging GreySheet off. But when the push came to shove, those are the people that I called. It's amazing how that little seed got sown and just sat in my head for a decade. And then, you know, when the time came, that's who I phoned. And after a few days of sort of getting, you know, understanding about the Zoom meetings and all that sort of thing, and the timings, I eventually got myself on a Zoom meeting on the 14th of February. Thanks, Denise. And I managed to get a sponsor at my first Zoom meeting, and I spoke to her on the phone, and she asked me to eat this it was an enormous meal, a real plateful of food, and I thought, oh, well, this is all right, you know. But it's interesting because the feelings I had around contacting Grey Sheet and making a start on the Grey Sheet program were exactly the same as the feelings I had the night before I went into rehab for alcohol. It was that fear of the unknown, fear of leaving a life behind that I was so used to, and also just this kind of, you know, sadness that probably there were things that I weren't going to be able to eat again, and, you know, catastrophizing and projecting the rest of my life, you know, into one thought. And I'm just absolutely blown off my feet with the abundance of food that I have had since I've been in Grey Sheet. And my sponsor said to me very early on, you know, this is a program of abundance. If I go around feeling deprived, then I'm not going to, you know, be motivated to continue with it. And it's true, unless you know, and I think that's just normal human psychology. You know, we don't tend to go back to things that we don't particularly enjoy, except, you know, work. But I don't go back to that now. And I just really enjoy it. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life shopping and shopping, but I've become more efficient about managing my food and preparing my food. I just find suddenly I've got time between meals to do things. And although I don't know whether I'd say I've got more energy, but I just seem to be more productive. I get more done because I've just got more time, and I've got more motivation, and I've got less distractions because I'm not drifting into the kitchen every 5 minutes, you know, taking something out of the fridge. And it's not 5 minutes and eating something out of the fridge. It's then another 10 minutes feeling terrible about myself and hating myself and having the same conversation about, you know, why I'm so useless and all that kind of crap that goes on between your ears. And I just don't have that anymore. Just that getting rid of that noise is such a relief. And, you know, I can just get on with things. And then, you know, at about 12 or 12:30, I think, oh, you know, I better go in and start just fixing a bit of lunch, and then I do that, and then I think, oh, well, you know, I've got 10 minutes before I need to eat, so I can just quickly do X, Y, or Z. And it's that I never had in my life before. Before then, I just felt totally overwhelmed by everything that needed doing, and I had the weight of the world on my shoulders and felt sorry for myself. And that took up a lot of time, and wasted a lot of mental energy. So my brain, I think, is, I don't know, I was talking to somebody about this last night or today, but my brain is kind of less active in a way, because it's not, I haven't got this rat scurrying around on a little treadmill, you know, just with the same old circular thoughts, self-pity, self-blame, self-loathing, all that kind of stuff. It just, I'm not saying that I've suddenly turned into this confident person who's you know, completely in love with myself. I still have pretty low self-esteem and low self-worth, but it's just not, I'm not feeding that. I'm literally not feeding that anymore. And that makes all the difference. It's like, thanks Denise. Yeah, I've stopped feeding that rat, basically. And so the rat has gone away and gone to bother somebody else, just like rats do. Normally, you know, they'll only hang around where there's a food source. So I've stopped feeding it. And now I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. I really do. I never dreamt that I would be so satisfied with such a food plan. And so that for me is a life beyond my wildest dreams. I'm really looking forward to doing more service and doing my steps and you know, just continuing to grow in this fellowship. I can't wait, but at the same time, I don't want to rush it. I want to do things thoroughly and take it slowly. And I'll just I'll pass at that point. Thank you.